just to keep an eye on this. And of course, the big story that came out overnight, that deal between Israel's government and Hamas for a 4-day pause in fighting. And of course, to allow the release of 50 hostages held in Gaza in exchange for 150 Palestinians imprisoned in Israel. Let's cross over to our correspondent in Tel Aviv, Sarah Coates. Sarah, a very good morning to you. So let's talk about the freeing and the timeline on this. When do we expect these hostages to start being released?
Good morning there, Leanne. Well, look, this is expected to go into effect tomorrow being Thursday morning. There will be a 20 or so hour period now that people can lodge a complaint at the Supreme Court, although this deal is not expected to be reversed. Now, what we are seeing here is 50 Israeli women and children. There'd be 30 children, 8 mothers and 12 other women released in exchange for around 150 Palestinian prisoners. They'd also be women and children. Now, there'll be a complete halt in fighting on the ground for this 4-day period. Also, no Israeli air traffic over the Gaza Strip for this time, except for 6 hours in the north of the Strip every single day. This is when Israel can operate these drones. Now, here's how it's expected to happen. They would be handed over from Hamas to the International Red Cross, where they'd then be taken by a representative from the Israeli military. They'd then be flown to hospital here in Israel to be checked by a number of doctors before being transferred to another more secure and isolated medical facility where they would be reunited with their families. Now, after this, they would then be assessed to see whether they are fit enough to have some sort of a security briefing. And once that decision is made, then they may be briefed by senior intelligence officers, of course, about their ordeal inside the Gaza Strip and exactly what happened. Now, it is important also to point out that this 4-day ceasefire, this 4-day truce could be extended if Hamas is able to locate a number of other women and children inside the Strip. Right now, it's estimated that there are around 30 people who are unaccounted for, because it is believed that a number of other Palestinian factions like Palestinian Islamic Jihad has these people, but Hamas simply doesn't know where they are. So look, this could be extended if more hostages are released, and they would be released on a daily basis, 12 or 13 people per day.
Reading further into the deal, and perhaps maybe you can elaborate for this, it is one where the government has said the release of every additional 10 hostages will result in 1 additional day in pause. So as you say, this pause, which is scheduled for 4 days, could actually go on longer if this is the case in terms of the release of the hostages.
Exactly. And look, there is a lot of hope that this could be the beginning of a longer ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire. And if this all goes well, there is a lot of hope that other captives could be released. We're talking here these foreigners, also all of these Thai workers and a number of other captives being held in the Strip. It is believed, though, that Hamas simply doesn't want to give up any soldiers. It's unknown to the public exactly how many soldiers are being held in the Strip. But look, it certainly is good news, of course, after 6 weeks of intense fighting, so many lives lost in the Strip, and of course the anxiety and absolute worry of these families who've had their loved ones being held now inside the Gaza Strip for more than 46 days with no word on how they are. And one other important point here is that this deal will also see the International Red Cross have the ability to go into the Strip and actually take medicine and other types of things into these people who are left that aren't part of this women and children deal. So that is certainly good news, given that prior to this, there's been absolutely no access to these people.
And just finally, Sarah, before I let you go, obviously the families of these hostages are now waiting. I mean, they obviously don't know if their family are going to be a part of the hostages that are going to be released. Obviously, women and children get preference. But have we heard from the families at all, the reaction from them at this point?
Well, look, we did understand that there was a list involved. So it's unclear at this point whether these families have been briefed, whether their person, their loved one is on that list. But there is, of course, a lot of happiness here in Israel today, knowing that at least some of these people, potentially the most vulnerable, like these little children, some of them are as young as 9 months old, will be getting out of the Strip. But there's also a lot of concern, of course, for a number of other people who may not be on that list. And the weight, the anxiety and the absolute heartache from these families has really been spilling out over these past 6 weeks. People are absolutely furious at the government. And there was even another protest as these 3 meetings took place here in Tel Aviv last night. People are furious that the government simply hasn't done any more than it has to get these people out.
In terms of the release of the Palestinian prisoners as well, because that's what the deal entails there, do we have any details as well from the Israeli side in terms of releasing these prisoners?
Well, look, one of the main points there with these Palestinian prisoners was that it could not include anyone who'd been convicted of murder. So they will, of course, be women and children as well. 150 or so of these Palestinian prisoners. No word on who they are yet, but this was under a lot of discussion last night in these meetings with these security ministers discussing potential risks about letting prisoners out of jail. Now, they're expected to be released back to both the West Bank and also East Jerusalem, but no further details on exactly who they are at this hour.
I want to talk also, just before we let you go, I know, Sarah, we haven't got too much time with you, but the situation in Lebanon as well. We know that we saw things getting escalated in Lebanon, and one of the issues, and certainly one that was a big one, was the killing of 2 journalists. And this is now taking a big crux of the attention. Let's talk about Hezbollah, the Israeli forces, and what's happening in Lebanon, especially after the killing of 8 individuals yesterday.
Well, look, I did hear some unconfirmed reports yesterday that the Israeli military actually sent an additional 100,000 Israeli troops to that northern border with the Lebanese border there. With these tensions really spiking over the last few days, we've seen a real increase in cross-border skirmishes, and that really came to a head yesterday with that strike inside Lebanon, which killed a number of journalists and also reportedly a number of civilians. Now, Israel hasn't actually come out to claim this strike. It had been saying throughout the day that it was targeting, quote, terror cells inside Lebanon that were firing rockets into Israel. But this is really the biggest escalation that we've seen over the course of this 6-week war. And generally, this sort of situation would not be tolerated. This sort of a situation has tipped Israel into war with Lebanon in the past. But given what is happening down in the Gaza Strip, they are really trying to keep a lid on that northern front. And we've seen all of this international pressure. There are aircraft carriers sitting out in the eastern Mediterranean, US squadrons there really trying to keep the lid on this, given the fact that Hezbollah is backed by Iran. And if Iran and its proxies get into the fray, it would really cause this situation to widen, to escalate to a point that nobody wants, given the sophisticated weapons that these proxies and Iran are well known to have.
All right, Sarah, we'll leave it there. Thank you. Thanks for that comprehensive update coming to us live from Tel Aviv. Our correspondent out there is Sarah Coates.